Within weeks, 10,000 coal miners would march on Logan County in the largest armed labor insurrection on the planet. This is the story of how American workers took up arms for the right to organize. West Virginia in the coal mines of the early 1920s was rife with conflict. In the company towns of southern West Virginia, the companies controlled everything. The houses miners lived in, the stores where they shopped, the schools their children attended, the churches where they prayed, even the money in their pockets. Miners weren't paid in US dollars. They were paid in company scrip, currency issued by the companies themselves. Scrip could only be spent at company stores, where prices were inflated up to 30% and debt was inevitable. You didn't work for the coal company, you belonged to it. And the mines, they were death traps. Accidents were constant. Cave-ins, explosions. But when miners died, the operators blamed them, not the company's disregard for safety. Pay was lower than anywhere else in the country. Conditions were even poorer. And if you complained, you were blacklisted, evicted, beaten, or worse. The United Mine Workers of America, founded January 25th, 1890, had been fighting to change just that. In states where the UMWA had power, miners earned fair wages, worked safer conditions, had a voice. But in southern West Virginia, the union was the enemy. Local governments sided with the operators. Sheriffs were on company payrolls. Violence and intimidation crushed every attempt to organize. But the coal companies had a private army of their own. The hired Baldwin Phelps Detective Agency evicted families and beat organizers. Their ally, Sheriff Don Chafin, the czar of Logan County, paid $32,000 yearly by operators to keep unions out. A young Bill Blizzard was intimate with union life. Accompanied by his father, he started mining at age 10. Little did he know, by 1921, at 29 years old, he'd become a union organizer trusted by thousands. He was about to lead an army. April 1912. Operators of Paint Creek in southern West Virginia rejected wage increases. In response, 7,500 miners struck. For a month, it was peaceful. May 10th, operators hired 300 Baldwin Phelps guards. Miners were evicted, families moved to tent colonies. Beatings and sniper attacks became daily occurrences. February 7th, 1913, an armored train called the Bull Moose Special machine-gunned the worker residents. A miner trying to make ends meet by the name of Sesko Estep was famously killed protecting his pregnant wife as she saw the train go past. This event formed a lasting image in the mind of 16-year-old Bill Blizzard. Mother Jones, famously considered the most dangerous woman in America, worked closely with Bill's own mother to sabotage the rail line and drag a rocking chair onto the tracks to stop a second round of the train. In the end, martial law was declared, Jones was imprisoned, and the strike ended after 50 deaths. In her place, new leaders emerged. Frank Keeney became United Mine Workers District 17 president in 1916. Miners had caught a tight anticipation. Coal companies would react to the unions with brutal and utter violence. Spring 1920. In Matewan, Mingo County, the union was pushing in. Roughly 3,000 miners signed union cards at the community church, knowing it could cost them everything. Even abandoning contracts saying they would never join a union, membership in the United Mine Workers skyrocketed. In response, 13 Baldwin Felts detectives arrived in Matewan to evict union miners from company houses. They'd spend the day throwing families into the streets. The detectives didn't have the legal authority to do it, but they did it anyway. As they prepared to board the evening train, West Virginia law enforcement officer and miner Sid Hatfield confronted them. He claimed he had a warrant for their arrest. They were operating in his town without authorization. When Detective Albert Felts tried to arrest Sid Hatfield, a shootout broke out. The gunfight lasted less than 2 minutes, leaving 10 dead on both sides. 15 months later, Baldwin Felts agents gunned down Hatfield on the steps of a courthouse in broad daylight. His wife watched him die. 3,000 attended his funeral, and none of the killers were ever convicted. The coalfields erupted. Miners were outraged, determined to free imprisoned Unionists and avenge Hatfield. By August 24, 1921, up to 10,000 armed miners began marching, wearing red bandanas. When Frank Keeney was charged and fled to Ohio, leadership fell to Bill Blizzard. Now 29 years old, the boy from the mines turned general of an army. To reach Mingo County, they had to pass through Logan County. The Czar returns. Sheriff Chafin assembled 2,000 men and dug in along Blair Mountain, 10 miles of trenches and machine gun nests. President Warren Harding threatened martial law, and the Union was divided. Did they really want to fight for justice, even at the expense of thousands of lives? Frank Keeney tried to stop the miners. They ignored him. Mother Jones lied, claiming Harding ordered them home. They saw through it. But when U.S. Army troops arrived September 1st, the miners surrendered. They wouldn't fight federal soldiers. At the end, 985 miners were indicted for treason and murder. Trials were held in the same famous courthouse where John Brown was convicted for his raid on Harper's Ferry in 1859. Most prominent was the trial of Bill Blizzard himself. His lawyers presented an unexploded bomb as proof that the government conspired with coal companies. He was acquitted. Most other cases were dropped, though some miners served up to 4 years. The Battle of Blair Mountain was a short-term failure. However, it proved that federal labor protections were necessary. The violence influenced the 1933 National Industrial Recovery Act and the 1935 Wagner Act, guaranteeing workers' rights to organize. In 1935, under Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal, the Union finally organized southern West Virginia. 92% of America's miners joined within 3 months. They won the 8-hour day, weekends, pensions, healthcare, workplace safety, rights we take for granted, bought with blood on the mountain. Bill Blizzard lived to see it. The miners had trusted him. Some called him a hero. The red bandanas became symbols of solidarity. Redneck was once a badge of honor. 10,000 miners lost the battle in 1921, but they won the war. Every time you clock out after 8 hours, every weekend off, every safety regulation, every union contract, remember Blair Mountain. Remember the price they paid. Remember that when justice is denied long enough, people fight back. And sometimes that fight changes everything.